Please welcome the Editorial Director for Clarion Fire Rescue Group and the Education Director for FDIC International, Bobby Halton.
We learn very young that everything in life has a price. Everything. Being a firefighter has a price. Sometimes the ultimate price. And death notwithstanding, it always comes at a high cost. Being a firefighter, every one of you here today has reasoned and accepted the cost. We've publicly acknowledged what we're willing to endure, what we're willing to pay for this honorable life, for the privilege of being an American firefighter. So what is it that drives us? Duty, honor, fidelity. You know, all those fine words and their virtues fall far short of explaining why the rewards of being a firefighter far outweigh the costs. The life we have chosen is a hard one. Maybe that's why we chose it. Choices, the actions we take, what we actually do, that's what defines us, not words. We're living in real serious times. Some would say that we're going through hard times. The author and novelist G. Michael Hoff, in his post-apocalyptic novel, Those Left Behind, wrote the following words: "Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men. And weak men create hard times." As firefighters, we can see the implications of those incredibly powerful words. Hard times create strong firefighters. When strong firefighters face adversity, they don't hide from it. As a matter of fact, obstacles are just opportunities to strong firefighters. Firefighters don't run from hard times, we run towards them. We embrace them. We seek them out. Strong firefighters make a difference. Strong firefighters make the world a better place. Strong firefighters are resilient, they're honest, and they're reliable. Strong firefighters, like strong people, however, are not always popular. A great example was Admiral Ernest King. He and several other older officers were requested to return to active duty during World War II, although they were technically, by military standards, too old to serve. As they gathered privately amongst themselves, some remarked on how the new Navy was anxious to get rid of them because they were too tough. They were too insensitive. They weren't progressive enough. Hearing those comments, Admiral King reportedly stated, "Yes, damn it, when they get in trouble, they send for the sons of bitches." Now, none of those men were genteel or passive about their work, the mission, or their purpose. They were strong leaders, unapologetic leaders. None of them would be considered easy to work for, and today's HR people would fire them all. But they saved the world from tyranny and oppression, and then they just quietly went home. The good admiral also said, "Every naval officer has a job to do. He should do that job out of a sense of duty and not get recognition for having what he has been trained to do. His only reward should be the satisfaction of knowing that he has done the job well and to the best of his ability." Admiral King served in hard times created by weak people who inherited good times. Yes, we learn very young that everything in life has a price. Everything. The good times have a cost, the hard times have a cost. Being strong has a cost, and being weak has a cost. Today, strong firefighters are having a robust and spirited tactical debate. It surrounds the needs of victims, rescue, Risk versus safety. There are some who say that this rescue discussion that we're engaged in, that this tactical debate that we're having is simple. They would have you believe that there are silver bullets, that all we need is a slogan, something for our t-shirts or a coffee mug. They would have you believe there are straightforward answers, that we simply need a standard dogma, a one-size-fits-all rescue profile. Now, we've been having this debate long before anyone in this room was born. The conundrum is a clash between our fundamental virtues, our intellectual virtues, the virtues of our minds, and our moral virtues, the virtues of our hearts. We achieve our intellectual virtue through study and learning. We gain our moral virtue from habit and training. The struggle we now face is applying some of our ongoing research and study while simultaneously applying our innate compassion in real-world settings. It's a struggle for all firefighters as a profession and individually. Is the price you are paying or willing to pay worth the outcomes, the immediate results, and the distant consequences? There's nothing simple about this question. For us dedicated to the fire service, intellectual virtue is knowledge. It's our relentless inquiry in improving our methods, tactics, organizations, and our operational deployments. This virtue requires study, thought, and examination. Our moral virtue does not come from classroom or study. It comes from habit. Moral virtues are courage, compassion, integrity, loyalty, and faith. Moral virtues come from our training in developing good habits. We train to act with restraint for our own first impulses. We don't judge. We always act with respect for others' dignity and their humanity. We have a reasonable concern for the distant consequences that we may face. We call it our code, our oath, our ethics. The word ethics is a Greek word. It means habit. Aristotle once said, we become just by doing just acts, temperate by doing temperate acts, and brave by doing brave acts. There's a great song from the musical The Man of La Mancha. It's inspired by Miguel Cervantes' 17th century novel, Don Quixote. It's a story within a story about a strong man who was imprisoned during the Spanish Inquisition. Talk about hard times. The song is called To Dream the Impossible Dream. The song goes, to dream the impossible dream, to fight the unbeatable foe, to bear with unbearable sorrow, to run where the brave dare not go, to be willing to march into hell for a heavenly cause. And the world will be better for this, that one man, torn and tattered with scars, still strove with his last ounce of courage to reach the unreachable. Incredible song, amazing imagery. Firefighters who know nothing of the play automatically assume that old Don Quixote, the hero, he's on engine 38B shift. Don Quixote has figured out what he is willing to pay. For him, the old knight on engine 38, the scorn, the scars, even death was a price he was willing to pay. For him, the heavenly cause was a prostitute named Alidonza. He called her Dulcinea. She was worth it. The play and firefighting are about moral virtue and intellectual virtue balanced. Moral virtue is the same as good character. Intellectual virtue is the same as street smarts. You know, it's not uncommon to be at one of our awards banquets. We're hearing stories of bravery and sacrifice, stories that civilians, they find them impossible to understand. Our stories, stories of strong men and women going into raging fires, marching into hell, exposing themselves to disease, injury, often risking death without hesitation. Our friends and family often ask, was it worth it? Being a firefighter, spending the holidays, birthdays, special moments away from family. Was it worth it? Getting cancer, being burned, broken bones, broken hearts. broken marriages, often living so drained that you feel yourself weak and tired all the time. So was it worth it? Was the price you paid or are willing to pay worth it? Now, when I was sent to the personnel department, that's what it was called back in my day, before it tragically became known as human resources and started screwing up everything. I routinely got the, if you had to do it all over again, would you do anything differently question. It's an interesting question to ponder, but it's pointless. You see, it's in our American blood. President Kennedy once said, we choose to do these things not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Firefighters, we find meaning, we find purpose, we find fulfillment in doing difficult things. You know, most of us knew as kids that we were going to grow up to be firefighters. I remember when the teacher read to us the story of St. George, the dragon slayer. We remember that old George was this great knight, and everything under his control was good. Even with everything in his world under control, old George was restless. When the teacher read to us the line where George says, these people are all safe and happy. They need me no more. But somewhere, perhaps there's trouble and fear. There may be some place where children cannot play in safety. Some woman may have been carried away from her home. Perhaps there are even dragons to slay. Tomorrow I shall ride away and not stop until I find work that only a knight can do. Yep. The future lawyers, CPAs, and HR professionals, they checked out right there. Old George is an idiot, they figured, and they could no longer follow that storyline. But not us, not firefighters. We related to that morally ambitious George, habitually searching to aid others. We all know that strong firefighters, people like you, fight to get on those busy companies. Those are usually run by really demanding, strong bosses. They don't hand out ribbons and trophies for showing up. These strong, high-powered officers are absolutely clear. The price you will pay will be high. You will work harder. You will train more. Why do good firefighters want these strong bosses? Well, I guess we learned that in Bible school. Proverbs 27:17. As iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens the countenance of his friend. Our founding fathers fought this battle between the habits of the mind and the habits of the heart. They chose to pledge their lives, their fortune, and their sacred honor to a cause that from its inception was an impossible dream. Our ancestors did it again in our great Civil War, where over 1 million died. The price for freedom for all men, which we know was absolutely worth it. Again in World War I, and perhaps most famously on June 6, 1944, D-Day. General George Patton, the night before D-Day, strong leader, in his commander's fight talk, shared some really important thoughts. Here are a few. He began, Americans love a winner and will not tolerate a loser. Americans play to win all the time. The good general added, all through your Army career, you men have bitched about what you call this chicken shit drilling. Well, it's all for a purpose, to ensure instant obedience to orders and create a constant alertness. An army is a team. Every single man in the Army plays a vital role. Don't ever think that your job is unimportant. Then he told this short story. One of the bravest men I ever saw was on the top of a telegraph pole in the midst of a furious firefight. I stopped and asked him, what the hell was he doing up there? He answered, fixing the wires, sir. Isn't it a little unhealthy up there right now, I asked. Yes, sir, but this goddamn wire's gotta be fixed. I asked, don't those planes strafing the road bother you? He answered, no, sir, but you sure as hell do. Now there was a real soldier. A man who devoted all he had to his duty, no matter how great the odds, no matter how seemingly insignificant that duty appeared at the time. It's interesting how speeches can affect us. St. Moses the Black once wrote, "The Lord gives a man grace of speech in proportion to the sincerity of which his audience wishes to hear him." Sitting in the audience that day was a young soldier named Joseph Robert Burrell. When the Great Depression hit, his old man lost his job, they lost their home. Hard times. Burrell had the opportunity to go to Notre Dame on a full scholarship, but instead he enlisted. He chose to become a paratrooper. While in training, Joe drilled so hard that he earned the nickname Jumpin' Joe. Because he was so good, our OSS approached him and asked him, "Would you be willing to jump into France to deliver gold to the resistance?" Joe was 19 years old. He didn't speak a word of French. He knew it was a suicide mission, and he said, "Absolutely." Joe delivered the gold, returned back to England, where he was promptly asked to do it again, and again without hesitation, he agreed. It was June 5th, 1944, as he listened to old Blood and Guts Patton give his commander's fight talk. Next morning was D-Day. Joe was forced to bail out at an extremely low altitude. He got separated from his company. He landed on the roof of a church. All alone, he fought his way off. He killed a few Nazis. He blew up a power substation. He ambushed a squad of German infantry, and then he headed off to go blow up a bridge. He crawls through a hedgerow, and he falls headfirst into a German machine gun nest and finds himself surrounded. Marching off to a POW camp, they come under heavy fire. Joe escapes, and he's able to avoid recapture for about 12 hours. Next, they capture him, they put him in a truck, and they start going in the truck. They come under heavy fire. Again, Joe escapes, only to be recaptured. Now, the Germans, nice people, but they didn't take kindly to him escaping over and over again, and every time he was recaptured, he was severely beaten. During one beating, he called a German officer a son of a bitch, and he woke up 3 days later in a hospital with what he called as a bashed-in head and a big headache. That bashed-in head and big headache was severe brain trauma and a fractured skull. It would go untreated. Joe would suffer from it for the rest of his life. For the next 7 months, Joe would be in seven different prison camps. He was able to escape twice. He was recaptured each time. After each escape, he was brutally beaten by the Gestapo. His face was smashed in, bones were broken, his head was pounded on over and over again mercilessly. He was taken to Stalag III, where the beating and torture continued. One day, he and 3 of his buddies smashed through a mud wall and start to run from the camp. Joe's buddies were mowed down by machine gun fire, but Joe just kept running. By the grace of God, he encounters a Soviet tank battalion. Joe, after a few weeks, becomes the only American to ever fight within a Soviet tank battalion. He was wounded a few weeks later when a German dive bomber took out the vehicle that he was riding in. Joe was evacuated to a Soviet hospital and then transferred to the American lines. Joe never recovered from his head injuries or the beatings he incurred. Joe returned home, married the girl of his dreams. He worked until he was 75. He rarely spoke of his exploits. He rarely complained. Strong man. When asked why he continued to escape, knowing that each time he would be mercilessly beaten, Joe just replied, "It was my duty." To Joe, the cost was worth it. He died at the age of 81, a true American hero. On May 14th, 1991, FDNY Rescue 1 received an alarm for fire at a commercial building. On arrival, they could see 2 victims on opposite sides of 12th floor windows, clinging for their lives. On the roof, Lieutenant Patty Brown tried to reassure the victim as firefighter Patrick Barr prepared to descend on a life-saving rope. One of the most dangerous rescues that we can perform. Adding to the risk, firefighter Kevin Shea, who was to be the lowering man, informed Brown that there was no substantial object on which to anchor himself and that he would have to bear the weight of the two men, the rescuer and victim, by himself. Lieutenant Brown quickly ordered firefighter O'Keefe and firefighter Newberry to hold Shea as he lowered the rope. Without hesitation, Shea sat on the roof, bracing himself against the wall with his feet. O'Keefe and Newberry positioned themselves on either side of Shea. As Barr reached the victim jumped onto the rope. The severe impact caused the rope to stretch, and it pulled Shea, O'Keefe, and Newberry and Brown to the edge of the roof. Nobody let go. They held their positions and they stabilized that rope. They then lowered them to the floor below. But Rescue 1 still had a second victim. The interior fire conditions had worsened. The same high-risk procedure would have to be done again. This time, Shea would be lowered by firefighter Ray McCormick on a rope that had already been severely impacted. Shea was lowered to the second victim. Shea secured the victim, and they were lowered to the floor below. This is still one of the most dramatic and unique rescues in the history of the FDNY. But the story doesn't end here for Kevin Shea. On February 26, 1993, Rescue 1 responded to the World Trade Center bombing. When they entered the lobby, they were told by building personnel that some of the workers couldn't be located. Searching for the workers in near total darkness, the floor suddenly collapsed. Shea fell some 40 to 50 feet through the rubble and fire. Falling, Shea tries to grab onto some rebar, but he couldn't. His face smashed into concrete as he fell. His body smashed again and again against concrete and steel. He landed bloodied and broken, a few feet away from raging fires. He tries to sit up, but he couldn't. He thought both his legs were broken. The bone in his left knee is protruding through his boot. He activates his pass device. He transmits a mayday signal. With concrete crashing all around him, fires and explosions all around him, he knew this location was unsafe. While trying to find cover, he hears a call for help. He tries to reach them, but he couldn't because that bone sticking through his boot got hung up on some debris. Much like the famous multiple rope rescues that Shea participated in 1991, a high-risk human anchor would be the method used to reach and remove Kevin. His injuries included a broken left kneecap, a broken right ankle, a broken nose, a broken bone in his forehead, multiple bruises and tears and injuries and pulls. He endured multiple operations and extensive physical therapy. Kevin Shea would just say, I was just doing my duty, doing my job. Kevin Shea is a strong firefighter, a man who endured hard times. His only expectation was for the satisfaction of knowing that he had done his job well and to the best of his ability. If you want to know if Kevin Shea feels as if the years of pain and suffering that he has gone through were worth it, well, you can ask him, because he's sitting right here. Kevin works here every year as our classroom coordinator. Most don't know that the quiet man putting up the sign for their class is one of the most iconic heroes of our time. Now, high-risk, life-saving rope rescues continue as a last resort in our service. But just 6 months ago, FDNY Engine 59 and Ladder 30 arrived to find a woman on a 16th floor window ledge with heavy black smoke billowing out. Ladder 30 firefighter Brian Quinn and Pat Sherrill race up to the apartment above. They saw a woman on the outside the window of the apartment ledge with her feet narrowly on the ledge, and she's clinging to that flimsy window screen. They immediately called the second due to bring a life-saving rope to their location. Ladder 28's firefighters raced to their location while they were establishing the lowering point. Now, there was no substantial object, so a Halligan was placed between the bedroom doorway. Firefighter Quinn swings out the window and says, "Down." While this operation was going on, the interior crews were able to knock down the bulk of the fire. They were trying to coax the woman back into her apartment. The woman was so confused and so panicked, she couldn't understand, and she wouldn't move. Quinn, realizing this, swiftly reaches her from above and presses her firmly against the window. Not understanding, this poor woman starts to panic. She's fighting off Quinn. After a few tense moments, Quinn and the interior crews are able to pull her to safety. This rescue is so unusual for many reasons. First, it was conducted not from the roof, but from the apartment above, with an improvised substantial object. Second, all four of these firefighters combined the habits of their minds with the habits of their hearts, and were successful. This is not an accident. This was truly the result of truly compassionate, truly thinking firefighters. The incredible rope rescues in '91, the amazing rescue of Kevin in '93, the dozens of rope rescues that have happened since then, including the latest in Harlem. All of them obviously well worth the risks for the immediate outcomes and the distant consequences, because they're understandable, they're measurable, they're real. It's easy for us to understand how the chicken shit drilling that Patton spoke of paid off in all of these rescues. How no one's job was insignificant. How the strong men and women involved in these rescues had no fear or hesitation of exposing themselves to hard times. In every single combination of these rescues, they combined intellectual virtue with moral virtue, with a result that we can celebrate. But endings, outcomes, often taint how we judge events, people, and intentions. We hope that we'll be judged by our good intentions. But the reality is outcomes, especially bad outcomes, is often how we are judged. On January 13, 2022, St. Louis Truck 13 was returning from a call when they spotted smoke in the area. Investigating, they came across a 2.5-story vacant home with fire showing on first and second floors. After a quick search for life, to ensure there was no one trapped inside, the firefighters were exiting when suddenly the building collapsed, trapping 2 firefighters beneath the debris. Rapid intervention crews were able to extricate them both. But unfortunately, firefighter Benjamin Paulson, age 33, passed away at the scene. At Ben's funeral, I learned a lot more about this fine young man. He was the son of a St. Louis firefighter. He was the wonderful best friend to his sister. He had earned a college degree in economics. He had earned a master's degree in business. He had even earned a law degree. But like St. George, Don Quixote, Jumpin' Joe, Kevin Shea, and Brian Quinn, even with all of these accomplishments, Ben was restless. Ben had a habit of helping others. Ben knew that somewhere children cannot play in safety, people were endangered, and there were fires to slay. Almost exactly 2 weeks after Ben's passing, 3 incredible Baltimore City firefighters, Lieutenant Paul Buttram, firefighter paramedic Kelsey Sadler, and firefighter EMT Kenny Lakeo would be killed in the collapse of a residential vacant building. All of these firefighters combine their intellectual virtue with their moral virtue on those scenes to make decisions that they thought would lead to favorable immediate results. The consequences are unbearable sorrow. These firefighters paid the ultimate price. These deaths, they tear at our heartstrings, they rip our emotions in ways that defy explanation. Perhaps it's the suddenness, the finality of knowing that someone so unique and irreplaceable is gone forever. These deaths remind us that the life we have chosen has costs, has consequences, and as if our dire pain and inconsolable grief weren't enough, from weak and insensitive voices, we hear disrespectful statements such as, "They died for nothing." These weak and frail voices fail to honor the good intentions that those heroes resolutely pursued. Those chattering third-class stringers, they scream, "They died in vain." Those heroes did not die in vain. Those heroes did not die for nothing. We will never allow anyone to besmirch their memories in these hallowed halls of FDIC or in our presence. I wouldn't give you a bucket of warm spit for the firefighter who didn't recognize their virtue, their valor, their courage, and their humanity. Those heroes didn't enter those structures because they thought they were witnessing spontaneous building combustion. The assumption that a house is vacant does not deter the mission of a thorough search for life, if possible, accounting for the understood dangers. On August 13th, 2021, the Indianapolis Fire Department responded to a vacant residence fire at 3156 Graceland. First arriving crews would find a two-story vacant, heavily involved in fire. Crews that operate in this neighborhood had responded to a fire in this structure before, and they relayed that structural integrity was sure to be compromised. An aggressive attack on the blaze ensued. Firefighter Marcus Evans and Terrence Tywin were assigned to search for life. They made their way from room to room, searching through dark and treacherous conditions. They did a quick sweep of the rear, and they thought it was clear. But something looked odd to Marcus. He flashed his light one more time. There in the corner, huddled in the fire and smoke, badly burned, but still alive, was a man. Marcus yells to Terrence for help. The two firefighters notified command they had a victim and they were bringing him out. Intellectual and moral courage compelled Marcus and Terrence to search. Diligent drill made them capable of focusing. And the habitual need to help others made them successful. Terrence and Marcus are strong firefighters. You see, firefighting has changed little in principle since the beginning of recorded history. The high-tech tools and machines that we use today, they're only an evolution from when strong men and women like you used wooden buckets. Machines and tools are nothing without you. Firefighters, the men and women who decide where and how to use them. Some say the technology, artificial intelligence as they call it, will someday be able to replace the brave men and women as decision makers. But Joe Burrell, Kevin Shea, Michael Quinn, Kelsey Sadler, Paul Buttram, Ben Paulson, Marcus Evans, and Terrence Tywin, they have something that no damn machine will ever have. They have empathy, they have compassion, they have intellectual and moral virtue. As firefighters, we do the best with what we have. We don't worry about the things that we can't control. We know that hard times are just things to overcome. And we're very much unlike most civilians who've chosen a softer, safer life. No disrespect meant, but most civilians value lives of luxury and comfort. Most value security, safety, and possessions. You're different. Firefighters are different. We don't look at long-term outcomes, including death, with dread. We have learned to stop being weary of truly living, as well as being scared of dying. We understand that even if death is on the way for one of us in the prime of our lives, that the life we have experienced, no matter how short as a firefighter, has rewards that the longest civilian life can never offer. Firefighters learn early in our careers that time adds nothing to a life well lived, whereas that same life seems short to those who measure life in terms of luxury, power, and material goods. But not us. Not strong firefighters. Not a firefighter's life. Not a life that has blended intellectual and moral virtue. Not a life measured by actions. Not a life devoted to the habit of helping others. Thinking back to our friends in the personnel department, wondering if we had to do it all over again, would we do anything differently? Yeah, sure. Would have avoided getting into that wreck on the way to the call, falling off that roof or that ladder. We would have avoided getting burned or stabbed. Would have preferred a life without autoimmune disease and cancer. Most of us would have avoided marrying our second, third, or maybe fourth husband or wife. Would have loved seeing our kids take their first steps, being with mom before she passed, and not seeing our best friends take their own lives. We would have had our friends leave those buildings sooner or not let them go in at all. Yeah, it sure be nice to be able to clean up the past, rearrange the deck chairs, as they say, but not if it meant not being there when that lady on that 12th floor needed us. Not if it meant not being there to intubate that baby, to hold that rope during the rescue. No, if it changed anything, we would not change a thing. I was sitting with a good friend of mine. We were outside of Dunkin' Donuts, drinking some bad coffee, enjoying the sunshine, and telling fire stories while we were lying to each other, when a young woman walked by. She stopped. She pointed to my buddy's Vietnam veteran's ball cap, and she said, "Were you a soldier?" My buddy leaned back and he said, "Sure was. It's how I got this cool hat." The young lady smiled, we chuckled, started to walk away, and she turned back and she said, "Thank you. Thank you for your service." My buddy, without hesitation, looked her in the eye and said, "You were worth it." You were worth it. You were worth it. I guess there's never been and never will ever be a better explanation for why the best men and women in the world joined this band of brothers, this total stranger. She represented his Dulcinea, his heavenly cause, a total stranger. She was the one to come home to. She was that terrified victim on the window ledge. She was the desperate man huddled in that fire. You see, this debate that we're having right now is good. We are not a house divided. Right may make might, but first it is righteous. And righteousness compels us, irrespective of the consequences, irrespective of the costs, to do our duty. We are not enemies in these hard times, in this important debate, but strong friends. We are strong, we are passionate firefighters. You see, bad events, tragic outcomes, hard times, they may strain our passions, but not our love for one another, not our love of mankind. The joyful memory of every fallen, unforgettable hero crosses this land from fire station to every beating American heart with joy across this broad and blessed land. As firefighters, we know that Ben's life, Kelsey's life, Tim's life, Paul's life, and Kenny's life were all worth it because of the thousands upon thousands that were affected by their lives, and the thousands upon thousands of us who were touched and inspired by their lives. We know that the sacrifices, the suffering, the scorn, and the scars that men and women like Kevin Shea, torn and tattered with scars, have been through were all worth it for the thousands upon thousands of people that they did it for, that you do it for. Every single one of you sitting in this room right now knows why you endure what you endure, why you tilt at windmills, why you're willing to bear with the unbearable sorrows. And yes, thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for marching into hell. Thank you for striving with your last ounce of courage. And yeah, I guess there's never been a better explanation for why the best men and women, the strongest men and women, joined the fire service. Was it worth it? Yes, we learned very young that everything in life has a price. Everything. We learned very young that every call has a face, a human face behind it. And that person, irrespective of their circumstances, irrespective of their association to them, those circumstances compelled the heroes that we honor at our banquets and our funerals to do what they did. Was it worth it? To our fellow citizens, our brothers and sisters who call us in their time of need, you should know that in our minds and in our hearts, whatever price was paid, whatever burden was borne, whatever suffering was endured, whatever the consequences, whatever the costs, you were worth it. God bless the United States of America. I'm going to go off script, and the producer's going to kill me because I'm long already. But I'm going to do something because I can. In the audience today is a man that I would like to recognize along with his compatriots, a man who I'm not worthy to be his father, and I hope that someday I will deserve that privilege and honor. My son, Lieutenant Commander Dean Halton, United States Navy. Just real quick, please, I would ask that Dean and every other man and woman who has served in our United States military, that 1% who swore to give their lives to preserve the greatest country on the face of the planet, our freedoms, our liberties, would you please stand so we could recognize you and honor you in this moment?